The first thing I burned in my new house was a frozen lasagna I had not even wanted. I had been living in the narrow blue rental on Marion Street for 11 days, long enough to learn that the bedroom window stuck whenever it rained and the downstairs floor tilted toward the kitchen. It was not long enough to know which neighbor owned the barking terrier, or why someone on the block dressed a ceramic goose in a different outfit every morning. 6 unopened boxes still crowded the living room. Another sat in the hallway with important written across the top, though I could not remember what was inside it. Moving had seemed easier when everything I owned was sealed in cardboard. A person could not be accused of settling down if he had not found his coffee mugs. The lasagna had been in the oven for maybe 12 minutes when the kitchen light flickered. The oven made a sound like a metal drawer being dropped down a flight of stairs, and smoke pushed out around the door. I stared at it with the detached disbelief of someone watching a problem choose him personally. Then the smoke alarm began screaming. I grabbed a dish towel, opened the back door, and tried to remember whether throwing water on an electrical appliance was one of those mistakes everyone knew not to make. Before I could make the wrong decision with confidence, someone pounded twice on the side door and came in carrying a red fire extinguisher. He was tall enough to duck under the frame. Rain darkened the shoulders of his gray work shirt, and his sleeves were pushed up over strong forearms dusted with sawdust. I had seen him twice through the front window, leaving the house next door before 7 in a dark green truck. Up close, he looked like the kind of man who knew where the main electrical panel was without asking. He shut off the oven, crossed to the breaker box, and killed the power to the kitchen while I stood there holding my useless dish towel. "Please tell me you didn't throw water on it," he said. I was still in the research phase. His mouth moved at one corner. Not quite a smile. He crouched in front of the oven and opened the door carefully. A ribbon of gray smoke rolled out. Heating element probably shorted. Wiring could be bad too. "So dinner is delayed?" He looked up at me with brown eyes that were steady and more tired than the rest of him. "Dinner is condemned." That was when a boy appeared in my open doorway wearing dinosaur pajama pants, a yellow raincoat, and one sock. He was 8, maybe 9, with dark hair falling into his eyes and the solemn expression of someone arriving to inspect a disaster. "Dad, is the new neighbor's house on fire?" "Noah, you're supposed to be inside. It smells on fire." The boy looked at the blackened lasagna. "It kind of looks on fire." "I prefer rustic," I told him. That earned me the smile his father had withheld. Noah stepped farther into the kitchen until the man put out an arm and stopped him. "I'm Luke Bennett," he said. "We're next door." I introduced myself as Danny Harper and apologized for making the block smell like burnt cheese. Noah considered this, then announced that they had spaghetti. Luke reminded him that having extra food did not mean they could manage someone else's dinner. "You already condemned his," Noah said. I liked him immediately. Luke stood and wiped his hands on his work pants. "You don't have to," he said. "He's right, though. We made too much." I almost said no. The answer rose automatically, polite and ready. "Thanks, but I'll order something." "Thanks, but I have work." "Thanks, but I don't want to intrude." I had used versions of that sentence in both of my parents' houses growing up, especially after they remarried and built new routines around new families. It was easier to say I was not hungry than to guess which chair belonged to someone else. Then Noah said, "Garlic bread too," as if he had identified the deciding factor. Luke told him to go put on his other sock, and Noah disappeared into the rain. "I can call your landlord tomorrow," Luke said. "I've done work for him before." That sentence somehow makes me trust my landlord less. This time Luke laughed. It was brief and low, but it changed his face. 5 minutes later, I followed him across the narrow driveway with my jacket over my head. The Bennett house was only a few steps away, but entering, it felt like crossing into a life already in progress. Shoes were lined beneath a bench by the door. A school calendar hung on the refrigerator under magnets shaped like planets. Someone had left a half-built model rocket on the counter. The kitchen smelled like tomatoes, garlic, and warm bread. It was the kind of room that looked used rather than arranged. Noah was at the table now, wearing both socks but no raincoat. A backpack occupied the chair beside him. Luke moved toward it, but Noah got there first, lifting the bag and dropping it on the floor. "You can sit there," he told me. "Nobody's using it." The words were ordinary. Noah was already reaching for the Parmesan before I sat down. Still, I paused with my hand on the back of the chair. "Nobody's using it." When I was 10, my father's new wife had asked me not to sit in the chair nearest the window because her daughter liked that spot. She had not been cruel. She had said it gently. I had moved without complaint and spent the rest of dinner wondering how long someone had to live in a house before a chair became theirs. "Danny?" Luke asked. I sat and blamed the hesitation on a long day. Luke placed a bowl of spaghetti in front of me. "You've been here less than 2 weeks. How long can the days be? I'm a freelancer. Time has no meaning. Lunch is usually almonds over the sink." "Send Doc. Lunch is usually almonds over the sink." "That's bleak," Noah said. "It's efficient. Dinner should have been awkward." I was a stranger under their kitchen light while rain tapped against the windows. Instead, Noah spent 10 minutes explaining a comic about a scientist who accidentally gave his dog the power to control weather. Luke corrected him only when the plot involved the dog driving a city bus. I asked whether the dog had a license. Noah said that was not relevant because the city had already been evacuated. Luke watched us over the rim of his water glass. He did not talk much, but he made silence feel deliberate. When Noah got sauce on his chin, Luke handed him a napkin before the boy noticed. When I reached for the garlic bread, Luke shifted the basket closer without interrupting the conversation. Small movements, practiced ones. Noah asked whether I drew after I mentioned that the dog's cape would probably get caught in the bus door. I said sometimes. Dad says drawing isn't a job. Luke looked offended. I said drawing on your math homework isn't a job. I explained that I designed book covers and illustrations. Noah leaned toward me. "For real books? Mostly imaginary ones." Luke's almost smile returned. "That sounds suspicious. It's a highly regulated industry." By the time we finished, the rain had strengthened against the porch. I stood and picked up my plate, but Luke took it from me. "You're a guest." The word landed more heavily than it should have. "I can wash a plate. I'm aware. Then this feels like an issue of trust. It's an issue of you nearly setting your kitchen on fire. The oven remains the primary suspect." Luke shook his head, smiling despite himself. Noah had gone to find his comic, leaving colored pencils beside the empty sauce bowl. For a moment, Luke and I stood too close near the sink. He smelled faintly of rain and cedar. His hand tightened around the edge of my plate, and his gaze dropped briefly to my mouth before returning to my eyes. Or maybe I imagined that because I had been lonely for longer than 11 days. "You really should stop using that oven," he said. "There goes breakfast." "You cook breakfast in the oven?" "No, but now that you're judging me, I might start." He looked like he wanted to say something else. Instead, Noah rushed back, carrying 3 sheets of paper, and the moment folded itself away. 20 minutes later, I crossed the driveway home with a foil-wrapped piece of garlic bread Luke had insisted I take. My house smelled like smoke and wet plaster. The silence felt larger after the Bennett kitchen. Through the rain-streaked front window, I could see part of Luke's dining room. Noah was gathering his pencils. Luke moved around the table, stacking dishes with one hand while rubbing the back of his neck with the other. He stopped beside the chair where I had been sitting. For a second, I thought he might push it in. He did not. He left it pulled slightly away from the table, as though someone had only stood up for a moment and might come back. Luke knocked on my door at 7:15 the next morning, which was an unreasonable hour for anyone who did not deliver coffee. I opened it wearing sweatpants, one sock, and the expression of a man who had spent half the night wondering whether a chair could look lonely. Luke stood on the porch in a dark work jacket with a travel mug in one hand and a small voltage tester in the other. Rain had flattened the front of his hair. "Your landlord called me back," he said. "You called him before breakfast?" "Some of us have breakfast before 8. He looked past me at the smoke-stained kitchen. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside, suddenly aware of the boxes lining the hallway and the empty frame where a picture should have been. He inspected the oven, then the outlet behind it, then the ceiling above the sink. I followed him with my coffee and offered commentary he did not request. When he pressed 2 fingers against a yellowed patch in the plaster, the surface gave slightly. Luke's expression changed from mild irritation to professional offense. "You've got a leak." I noticed the ceiling possessed a certain emotional softness. He climbed onto a chair, checked the cabinet above the sink, and found moisture along the back wall. "This didn't happen yesterday." "That is comforting in exactly no way." He stepped down and explained that the damaged section needed to be opened, dried, and repaired before mold became a problem. The oven wiring needed replacement, and the appliance itself was old enough to qualify for a pension. By 8, Luke had spoken to my landlord twice and arranged for one of his employees to start the ceiling work the following morning. He said the kitchen would be partly unusable for at least 2 weeks. I survived college with a microwave and a jar of peanut butter. That isn't surviving. That's becoming a cautionary tale. He wrote something on the back of an envelope and placed it on the counter. It was a list of things I should not touch, plug in, or stand beneath. You make excellent welcome packets, I said. Do all new neighbors get one? Only the ones who try to cook with exposed wiring. He picked up his tools, then paused near the door. We eat around 6:30. You can come over until this is fixed. The invitation was delivered in the same tone he had used to explain electrical hazards, which made it easy to pretend it was not personal. I appreciate it, but I can manage. Luke looked at the takeout menus scattered beside my laptop. Clearly, those are research. For what? Regional noodle pricing. He studied me for a second, as if deciding whether arguing would be worth it. 6:30, he repeated. Then he left. I spent the day working on a cover for a romance novel about 2 men snowed into a mountain cabin, which felt like the universe making fun of me. At 6:25, I heated a cup of instant soup in the microwave and congratulated myself on being independent. At 6:32, someone knocked. Noah stood on my porch holding a piece of notebook paper inside a plastic sleeve. Across the top, in thick blue marker, he had written dinner plan. Monday was tacos. Tuesday was chicken. Wednesday was labeled Dad Decides, which Noah had underlined twice with visible concern. At the bottom, he had added Danny can come if his kitchen is still broken. Dad said not to bother you, he explained. So I made a schedule instead. My gad. End quote. Does Luke know you're conducting neighborhood outreach? Noah shrugged. He knows now. Across the driveway, Luke stood on his porch with his arms folded. Even in the dark, I could see that he was trying not to smile. I looked down at my soup, then at the schedule. Give me 2 minutes. That evening's chicken was roasted with lemon and herbs, which was unfairly competent for a Tuesday. My chair was still beside Noah's, though his backpack had reclaimed it during the day. He moved the bag before I reached the table. Luke set down 3 plates without asking whether I was staying. The certainty of it made me uneasy in a way I did not want to examine. I told them about the terrible instant soup I had abandoned. Noah asked whether soup could be terrible if it was already soup. Luke said yes, and that Danny had probably found a way. I kicked him lightly under the table. He looked at me in surprise, then returned the kick with careful restraint. Noah continued eating, unaware that his father and I had apparently become 12-year-olds. The next 3 evenings developed a rhythm before I agreed there was one. I arrived between 6:20 and 6:40, usually carrying something unnecessary so I would not feel as if I came empty-handed. A loaf of bread, a bag of apples, once, a bottle of dish soap, which Luke held up and asked whether I thought he accepted household supplies as rent. Noah updated the dinner schedule daily and added small drawings beside each meal. I learned that Luke cooked when he was stressed and cleaned when he was angrier than he wanted Noah to notice. Luke learned that I removed raw onion from everything with surgical precision. On Thursday, he placed my plate down and said, "No onion," before I could ask. After dinner, Noah brought his superhero drawings to the table. The hero's name was Meteor Max, though his powers involved plants and weather and had nothing to do with meteors. I suggested the inconsistency could be explained by a tragic scientific accident. Noah stared at me as if I had finally said something intelligent. We spent 20 minutes redesigning the cape so it would not interfere with bus operation. Luke washed dishes at the sink and listened without pretending he was not. When Noah ran upstairs for another sketchbook, Luke dried his hands and picked up the drawing. He hasn't worked this long on anything that wasn't assigned. That sounds like praise. Don't get used to it. But his voice had softened. Noah went to bed at 8:30. I stayed to help with the dishes, even though Luke objected on principle. We developed an efficient system. I washed, he dried, and both of us ignored how often our hands met over the silverware. The kitchen was quieter without Noah, filled with the hum of the refrigerator and rain tapping the window above the sink. Luke asked how long I had been drawing professionally. 12 years if unpaid desperation counts, 7 if you want tax records. He said he had started working construction with his uncle at 19 and opened his own company after Noah was born. His other dad? Luke folded a dish towel once, then again. Not involved. The answer was calm but closed. It's been me and Noah for a while. I'm sorry. We're good. Just busy. He looked toward the stairs, where Noah's nightlight cast a narrow stripe across the hallway. People think being a single parent means you need rescuing. Mostly, you need someone to remember the permission slip before 7 in the morning. I can't help with permission slips, but I have strong opinions about capes. That has already become dangerously useful. His smile stayed this time. For several seconds, neither of us reached for the last plate. I became conscious of how close we stood, of his shoulder almost touching mine, of the warmth coming off him in the cool kitchen. Then he cleared his throat. Did you eat lunch? Yes. Luke looked at me. Almonds don't count. They do if there are enough of them. He opened the refrigerator, took out a glass container, and began filling it with leftover chicken. I don't need a packed lunch. It isn't a packed lunch. It's evidence that food can have more than one ingredient. He pressed the container into my hands and walked me to the door. The porch light painted the wet steps gold. Tomorrow might run late, he said. Don't assume dinner's canceled. I'll try to survive the uncertainty. He watched until I reached my door. The next evening, a client changed an entire cover concept at 5:48 and turned my afternoon into a small professional disaster. By the time I looked at the clock, it was almost 8. Luke's kitchen curtains glowed next door, but I assumed I had missed dinner and opened a bag of crackers over the sink. Then someone knocked. Luke stood outside holding a plate covered with foil. Noah's asleep, he said. He tried to wait. I started to apologize, but Luke handed me the plate before I could finish. Beneath the foil was chicken, potatoes, and green beans, still warm. You didn't have to keep this. I know. Through his open door, I could see the table. My chair held a plate, a folded napkin, and the dark blue cup I had used every night. For the first time, I understood that they had not simply made extra food. They had expected me. By the second week, I stopped pretending the dinners were temporary. The repairs in my kitchen had become a daily performance involving plastic sheeting, industrial fans, and a man named Jorge who greeted me each morning as if we were trapped in the same prank. Luke's company had removed part of the ceiling, replaced a corroded pipe, and discovered that my landlord's definition of recent electrical work meant sometime after the moon landing. I could have lived on takeout. Instead, at 6:20 each evening, I found myself checking the driveway for Luke's truck. At 6:25, I crossed over carrying whatever excuse I had bought that day. Bread, ice cream, a bunch of flowers Noah informed me were technically weeds. The grocery trip happened because Luke parked behind my car on Saturday morning and then disappeared inside his house. I waited 5 minutes before knocking. He opened the door wearing a faded black t-shirt, jeans, and the expression of a man who had already been awake for hours. Noah stood behind him with a shopping list nearly as long as his arm. We need cereal, Noah said. We have cereal, Luke replied. We need cereal with marshmallows. I pointed out that this was a meaningful distinction. Luke looked at me, then at my blocked car. We're leaving in 10 minutes. Come with us. It was not quite an invitation, and not quite an order. Somehow, I went home to change my shoes. At the store, Noah pushed the cart until he nearly took out a display of canned tomatoes. Luke confiscated it, and I became responsible for the list. We moved through the aisles with the strange coordination of people who had done this together before. Luke compared prices. Noah negotiated for snacks. I added coffee and was told by both of them that the brand tasted burned. When I reached for pre-cut vegetables, Luke replaced them with whole carrots. They're cheaper. They also require effort. You own a knife. That feels like an assumption. Noah watched us argue and whispered loudly. You sound married. Luke almost dropped the carrots. I laughed too quickly and became very interested in canned beans. In the bakery section, Luke reached over me for a loaf of bread. His chest brushed my shoulder, and his hand settled briefly at my waist to move past, without knocking me into the display. It was a practical touch, nothing more. Still, every nerve in my body noticed the shape of his palm through my jacket. He removed his hand immediately. Sorry, there are worse ways to be attacked near the sourdough. Luke gave me a look that held for a second too long. Then Noah returned carrying a box of cookies he had not been authorized to retrieve, and the moment dissolved into a discussion about nutritional fraud. That afternoon, Luke replaced the loose railing on my porch. I told him the landlord should pay him. He said the landlord was paying him. I mean extra for tolerating me. That part's still under review. I sat on the top step with my sketchbook while he worked. The air smelled like damp wood and fallen leaves. Sawdust gathered in the dark hair on his forearms. Every few minutes, he asked me to hold something, though I suspected he could have managed alone. When the railing was secure, he tested it twice. "Now you can stop pretending this house is trying to kill you." I looked at the exposed section of my kitchen ceiling. The house and I are still negotiating. Noah appeared with Meteor Max tucked under one arm and asked if I could make the drawing look like a real comic cover. We spread our papers across my living room floor while Luke cleaned up outside. Noah chose a title, changed it 4 times, and insisted that the weather-controlling dog needed more emotional lightning. I scanned his drawing, added color on my tablet, and placed his name across the bottom in large silver letters. When I turned the screen toward him, he went quiet. "That's mine. Every heroic dog needs an artist with unreasonable standards." Noah ran next door to print it. Luke remained in the doorway, looking at the finished image. "You didn't have to spend your Saturday doing that." "I know." The words sounded different when I gave them back to him. At dinner, Noah placed the printed cover in the center of the table and explained each design decision as if Luke had not watched most of the process. Luke listened anyway. When Noah went upstairs to find tape for his bedroom wall, Luke looked at me across the table. "He's going to remember this." I tried to make a joke, but something in his face stopped me. It was just a drawing, not to him. Luke lowered his voice. "People say they'll do things with kids and then forget. You didn't." The sentence carried more weight than the subject required. Before I could ask where that weight came from, Noah returned and demanded a vote on whether the cover should hang above his bed or beside his telescope. Our dishwashing conversations became the quiet center of my week. Noah filled dinner with facts, questions, and plot summaries. After he went upstairs, Luke and I spoke in pieces. He told me which clients paid late and which houses hid the worst surprises behind fresh paint. I told him about authors who wanted their covers to be both minimalist and more epic. One night, as he dried a bowl, Luke said he had tried dating twice since becoming a single father. Both attempts lasted less than 3 months. "Scheduling is hard," he said, "and people like the idea of a kid more than the reality of one." "What's the reality?" "Someone always needs something. Usually, when you're exhausted." "That sounds like most adults I've dated." He laughed, but his gaze stayed on the bowl. I told him I had never been good at building a life around another person. The admission escaped before I had prepared it. Luke waited. I said my parents divorced when I was 7, and afterward I learned to keep 2 sets of essentials because something was always at the wrong house. "I got good at packing," I said. "Then I got good at not owning much." Luke looked toward the unopened boxes visible through my window across the driveway. "You still do that." It was not a question. I rinsed soap from a plate longer than necessary. Moving is easier when you don't pretend it's permanent. That sounds lonely. It's efficient. I used the same joke I had made at our first dinner. Neither of us smiled. The next Tuesday, Eric called while I was carrying old kitchen equipment out to the porch. I had not heard his voice in almost 3 months. He said he had found some of my things in the storage closet of our old apartment and wanted to drop them off. His tone was careful. The way people speak when they once knew how to hurt each other and are trying not to prove they still can. I agreed to meet him outside after work. When I ended the call, Luke was standing near his truck with a coil of cable over one shoulder. "Everything okay?" It was my ex. Luke's expression barely changed, but he placed the cable in the truck harder than necessary. Eric arrived just before dinner in the same silver sedan he had owned when we met. He looked good, which felt rude, but predictable. We spoke beside the curb while he handed me a small box. The conversation stayed polite until he asked whether I was settling into the new place. "I'm trying." He looked past me at the houses, Luke's truck, and Noah's bicycle leaning against the porch. "Looks domestic." "Don't sound so alarmed." Eric smiled without warmth. "You always liked borrowing other people's routines." Before I could answer, Luke came out of his house and called my name. He held the screen door open with one hand. "Dinner's ready." Eric glanced between us. "Neighbor?" "Luke," I said. Luke walked down the steps and stopped beside me, close enough that our sleeves touched. He introduced himself, without offering more. Eric gave me the box. "I hope you find whatever you're looking for." "I hope the same." After he left, Luke carried the box into my house even though I had not asked. He set it on the counter beneath the temporary work light. "He wants you back." The question sounded casual, but Luke was twisting the kitchen towel in his hands. He didn't ask. Would you say yes if he did? I looked at Luke, at the set of his jaw, at the towel pulled too tight between his fists. Why? He released the fabric at once, only wondering. He walked toward the door before I could answer. I stood there with the unopened box between us, realizing, with an uncomfortable rush of hope, that I wanted him to be jealous. The box stayed on my kitchen counter for 3 days. I told myself I was too busy to deal with it, which was believable only if no one noticed how often I walked past it. Luke did not ask about Eric again. That should have made things easier. Instead, his restraint sat between us at dinner like a fourth-place setting. He was normal with Noah, normal with me, normal in the careful way people became when they were trying not to reveal that they had almost asked for something. On Friday, Noah announced we were having movie night because the weather app showed aggressive rain. Luke said that was not a real forecast. Noah said it was accurate. Then he looked at me. You're coming, right? I looked at Luke. He was already reaching for a third bowl. The movie was about a family of astronauts stranded on a planet where all the plants sang. Noah had chosen it because the dog wore a space helmet. We sat on Luke's couch with Noah between us at first, though he gradually migrated toward my side whenever something on screen became dangerous. Halfway through, his head settled against my shoulder. Luke noticed but said nothing. He only lowered the volume and pulled a blanket over Noah's legs. The room was warm, lit by the television and the lamp beside Luke's chair. Rain struck the windows hard enough to blur the porch light. Every few minutes, Luke glanced over. Sometimes he looked at Noah. Sometimes he looked at me. I stopped pretending I could not tell the difference. By the time the astronauts escaped the singing forest, Noah was asleep. Luke turned off the television and stood carefully. I'll take him. He slipped one arm beneath Noah's knees and the other behind his back, but Noah woke just enough to wrap both arms around my neck. Danny too, he mumbled. Luke's eyes met mine over his son's hair. Apparently you've been assigned. We carried him upstairs together, Luke holding most of his weight, while I kept Noah's arms from slipping. The staircase was narrow, forcing Luke and me close enough that his shoulder pressed against mine at every turn. Noah smelled like shampoo and buttered popcorn. I had the sudden, painful sense that I was helping with something ordinary. Not visiting, not observing, helping. Noah's room was crowded with comic pages, plastic planets, and books stacked sideways on every available surface. The Meteor Max cover hung above his bed in a black frame. Luke laid him down while I pulled off his socks. We moved around each other without speaking. Luke tucked the blanket beneath Noah's chin, then stood with one hand resting on the bed rail. His face had softened in a way I rarely saw when he knew anyone was watching. In the hallway, he left the door open a few inches. He likes you, he said quietly. I'm very likable. Luke leaned against the wall. You joke every time someone says something true. That sounds like an accusation. Observation. Professional? Personnel. The hallway light was dim. Blue marker stained the side of my hand from helping Noah revise a drawing before the movie. Luke looked at it, then at my face. Hold still. His thumb touched my cheek. I froze. He rubbed once, gently, and showed me a faint streak of blue on his skin. You had marker there. I was trying a new look. His hand did not fall immediately. His fingers rested near my jaw, warm and rough from work. I could hear the rain on the roof and the quiet hum of Noah's nightlight. Luke's gaze moved to my mouth. This time, I knew I had not imagined it. I leaned forward by less than an inch. Luke did the same. Then Noah called, "Dad?" from behind the half-open door, and Luke stepped back so quickly his shoulder hit the wall. Noah wanted water. Luke brought it to him while I waited downstairs, staring at the blank television screen and trying to slow my breathing. When Luke returned, he went straight to the kitchen and began gathering bowls that did not need gathering. I followed him. Luke. He rinsed an already clean spoon. He wakes up confused sometimes. I wasn't asking about Noah. The water kept running. Finally, he shut it off. I know. I waited for him to turn around. When he did, the openness from the hallway had disappeared. There was someone before, he said. Someone serious? He nodded. Evan. He lived here for almost a year. I looked toward the stairs. Noah remembers him? Yes. The single word sounded exhausted. Luke dried his hands and folded the towel with too much care. Evan had been kind to Noah. They went to baseball games, built the model rocket still sitting on the kitchen counter, and developed routines Luke had mistaken for permanence. Then it became real. Luke said, School pickups, sick days, plans that had to include someone besides us. Evan left 2 weeks after Noah's 5th birthday. He did not say goodbye properly because he thought that would make it harder. Noah waited by the front window every Saturday for months. Luke's voice remained controlled, but his fingers tightened on the towel. I should have been more careful. Evan's choice wasn't your fault. I let Noah believe he was staying. Maybe you believed it too. Luke looked at me, and the silence felt like an answer neither of us wanted to name. After that night, nothing happened between us, but everything felt closer to happening. Luke still brushed past me in the kitchen, though he became careful not to touch. I still stayed after dinner, though I left before the quiet could become dangerous. On Tuesday, Noah handed me an invitation to his school art night. My name was written beneath Luke's in dark blue pencil. "Parents and family can come," he said, then added, "and neighbors." Neighbors. Luke was standing behind him, holding a stack of mail. "You don't have to," he said. Noah turned. "He does if he wants to see my picture. I want to." Luke looked relieved and worried at the same time. The school gym smelled like tempera paint, floor wax, and pizza from the fundraising table. Children's artwork covered folding display boards beneath handwritten signs. Noah dragged us from project to project, explaining which classmates had ignored the instructions. Luke wore a dark button-down instead of his work clothes, and I spent too much time noticing how the sleeves fit his arms. Parents greeted him by name. Several looked at me with polite curiosity. Luke introduced me as his neighbor, which was accurate and somehow disappointing. Still, when the room became crowded, his hand settled briefly against my lower back to guide me around a cluster of chairs. The touch lasted only a second, but my body remembered the hallway. Noah's class had created pictures under the heading, "What Home Looks Like to Me." His drawing showed Luke's kitchen in bright blocks of color. The table was too large, the refrigerator leaned sideways, and the 3 people sitting together had arms that bent in impossible directions. One wore Luke's gray work shirt. One had Noah's dark hair and a Meteor Max logo. The third had my glasses and a blue cup in front of him. My throat closed before I could prepare for it. The teacher smiled at Noah. "Would you like to tell us about yours?" Noah pointed to each figure. "That's Dad. That's me. And that's Danny next door." "Dad." Then he said, with complete simplicity, "That's my family." For one quiet second, the word felt like warmth spreading through cold hands. I looked at Luke because I wanted to see that he felt it too. His face had gone still. The color drained from it so quickly that even Noah noticed. "Dad?" Luke forced a smile and told him the picture was excellent. He praised the colors, asked about the dog under the table, and did everything except look at me. The teacher moved on to another child. Noah pulled me toward the refreshment table. Luke followed several steps behind. On the drive home, Noah talked about glitter glue while Luke answered in short, careful sentences. I sat beside him in the truck, close enough to feel the tension in his shoulders and too far away to reach him. The following evening, 6:30 came and passed without a knock. At 6:45, Luke texted that work had run late and dinner was canceled. The next night, he said Noah was tired. Both explanations were reasonable. That was what made them hurt. At 7, I stood in my repaired kitchen with a takeout carton open beside the sink. Through the window, I could see the glow from Luke's dining room. Noah moved past carrying plates. For an instant, the familiar chair appeared at the edge of the glass. I could not tell whether anything had been placed in front of it. Then Luke entered the room. He looked toward my house and saw me standing there. Neither of us moved. After a long second, he reached for the curtain and pulled it closed. For the next 4 days, Luke became professionally courteous. He sent updates about my kitchen through text messages that sounded as if they had been written for an insurance claim. The replacement oven would arrive Friday. The plaster needed another coat. Jorge would return to check the outlet. There were no jokes, no questions about whether I had eaten, and no mention of dinner. On Wednesday, a younger man from Luke's company arrived to finish the trim around the ceiling. When I asked where Luke was, he said Luke had reassigned the job because he was overloaded. I could see Luke's truck parked next door through the window. It did not move all afternoon. Noah knocked once, carrying a library book he said I might like because it had a gay wizard on the cover. Before I could invite him inside, Luke called his name from the porch. His tone was not angry, but Noah immediately turned around. "Dad says I'm supposed to ask before I come over now." he explained. I looked past him. Luke stood with one hand gripping the porch rail he had repaired for himself years ago. You can come over any time, I told Noah. Luke's expression tightened. Danny, just my name, but it carried a warning. Noah looked between us, confused. I handed the book back and said we would talk later. He crossed the driveway slowly, glancing behind him as though expecting me to follow. That evening, I went next door before I could change my mind. Luke opened the door but did not step aside. The smell of tomato soup drifted from the kitchen. Behind him, I could hear Noah explaining something to the television. Can we talk? Luke looked over his shoulder, then came outside and pulled the door nearly closed behind him. Rain misted the porch rather than falling properly. The porch light made silver lines in his hair. This isn't a good time. There hasn't been a good time since the art night. His jaw shifted. I've been busy. You've been 10 feet away. He looked toward my house. Your kitchen's almost finished. That isn't what I came to talk about. Luke folded his arms. Noah's getting attached. I noticed. More than he should. The words struck harder than I expected. What does that mean? We let the routine become confusing. The dinners. The movie nights. The school event. He's 8, Luke. Exactly. He sees someone showing up every night and thinks that person belongs there. I waited for him to hear himself. But he kept going. Noah had already lost someone he trusted. Luke could not allow the same thing to happen again because 2 adults had enjoyed pretending at domestic life for a few weeks. Pretending? Luke looked away. That's not what I meant. It's exactly the word you chose. The front door opened behind him. Noah appeared in the gap. Is Danny staying for soup? Luke turned so quickly his shoulder blocked most of the doorway. Not tonight, bud. Noah frowned at me. Tomorrow? Neither of us answered. Luke sent him back inside and waited until the latch clicked. When he faced me again, his voice was lower. This is what I'm talking about. Noah asking whether I'm coming to dinner? Noah expecting you. You invited me every night because your kitchen was unusable. You kept my plate warm when I was late because food was already made. You asked if I was getting back together with Eric. Luke's face closed. That had nothing to do with Noah. At least that was honest. I stepped closer. Then tell me what it had to do with. He said nothing. The rain collected along the edge of the porch roof and dropped between us in an uneven rhythm. I could feel my anger thinning into something more dangerous. Did you think I encouraged him? I asked. Did you think I wanted Noah to call me family? Luke's eyes snapped back to mine. No. Then why are you treating me like I crossed a line? He rubbed one hand over his face. Because you don't understand what happens when a child builds his life around someone who can leave whenever he wants. The sentence left a clean silence behind it. I thought of my overnight bag on the floor of my mother's hallway. I thought of Eric telling me I always knew where the exit was. Luke had managed to find the oldest bruise in me without knowing where it came from. You think that's who I am? His anger vanished, replaced by immediate regret. Danny, I didn't say that. You said I can leave whenever I want. You can. So can you. He shook his head. It's different when there's a kid involved. No, Luke. It's different because you've already decided I'm the unreliable one. He leaned against the porch post and looked suddenly exhausted. Then he told me the rest of the story about Evan, not the edited version from the kitchen after movie night. Evan had not simply decided parenting was difficult. He had promised Noah they would always be a family. He had talked about adoption, changed the emergency contact forms at school, and helped Noah choose paint for a bedroom they planned to remodel. Then he left while Luke was at work. His clothes were gone before Noah came home. For 6 months, Noah asked whether he had done something wrong. Luke said he should have seen it coming, should have slowed everything down, should never have let another adult become essential before knowing he would stay. I'm not Evan. I know. Do you? Luke closed his eyes. I can't make the same mistake twice. There it was. Not a fear. A conclusion. I laughed once, without humor. You never gave me a choice. He opened his eyes. What? You never asked whether I was staying. You decided I would leave, then punished me for it in advance. I'm trying to protect Noah. From me? From losing you. The words came out rough, almost broken, but they did not fix what he had done. You don't get to remove me from his life and call it protection, I said. You don't get to decide I'm temporary, because admitting you want me here scares you. Luke reached for my arm, then stopped before touching me. I wanted him to finish the movement. I wanted him to say the dinners had mattered. that the chair had been mine, that closing the curtain had hurt him too. Instead, he said, "Maybe we need space until things settle." Space, the polite word for absence. I nodded because speaking felt unsafe. "Your employee can finish the kitchen. After that, you don't need to manage anything for me." Note, Danny, that isn't. You wanted clearer boundaries. I stepped off the porch into the rain. Now you have them. The new oven arrived Friday morning. By afternoon, the plastic sheets were gone. The ceiling was smooth, and every electrical outlet had been declared safe. Jorge congratulated me as if I had personally survived construction. That night, I cooked pasta in my own kitchen and ate it standing over the sink. The food was fine. The room was quiet. Through the window, I could see Luke and Noah at their table. Noah sat in his usual place. Luke sat across from him. The chair between them remained empty. Noah said something and pointed toward my house. Luke lowered his head. I moved away from the window before either of them could see me. The silence lasted another week. Noah stopped knocking, though I sometimes saw him watching from the driveway when I collected the mail. Luke left early and came home late. Once, our cars arrived at the same time, and we both sat behind our steering wheels until I got out first. I worked too much and slept badly. The blue cup remained next door. I found myself angry about that stupid cup, as if Luke had retained evidence of a person he no longer intended to welcome. I considered asking for it back. I considered moving. Both options felt like different versions of running. Eric's box still sat unopened on the counter. One Sunday morning, I finally cut through the tape. Inside were 2 sweaters, a stack of sketchbooks, an old phone charger, and the chipped ceramic bowl I used to keep keys in. At the bottom lay a silver key on a faded red ring, the key to the apartment Eric and I had shared. I had carried it for 4 years, even after moving most of my belongings out, because returning it would have meant admitting that the door no longer belonged to me. I remembered Eric asking me to renew the lease together. I remembered delaying until the deadline passed, then acting surprised when he chose a smaller place without me. He had offered permanence. I had treated it like a trap. Luke was wrong to decide I would leave, but he was not wrong that I knew how. I could disappear quietly, tell myself I was respecting his boundary, and spend the next year explaining why none of it had been serious. I could make Luke the villain, and never admit that part of me had been waiting for proof that the chair was temporary. Leaving would protect me from another rejection. It would also prove every fear both of us carried. I closed my hand around the old key until its edge pressed into my palm. Through the kitchen window, Luke's porch light came on. For weeks, I had treated that light as an invitation. Now I understood that waiting to be invited was another way of avoiding a choice. I placed the key back in the box, put on my coat, and stepped outside. Across the driveway, the familiar chair was visible through Luke's window, empty between him and Noah. I crossed the wet pavement without waiting for the curtain to close, the porch light to change, or anyone to make room for me first. Luke opened the door before I knocked. For 1 second, neither of us spoke. He looked as if he had been standing on the other side listening to my footsteps cross the driveway. Noah was at the table behind him, bent over a worksheet, the empty chair visible between them. Luke's eyes dropped to my coat, then to my wet hair. "Danny," my name sounded less like a greeting than relief. "We need to talk." He looked back at Noah. "Give me 10 minutes, bud." Noah glanced up, studied both of us, and nodded with the seriousness of someone who knew the air had changed. Luke stepped outside and closed the door softly. The porch smelled like rain and damp cedar. I had rehearsed 3 different speeches while crossing the driveway, and all of them vanished when Luke faced me. So I started with the truth. "You don't get to call fear responsibility." His expression tightened, but he did not interrupt. "You can decide you don't want a relationship with me. You can tell me the dinners meant less to you than they meant to me. But you can't push me away, hide behind Noah, and pretend you made the choice for everyone's good." Luke looked down at the wet porch boards. "You were scared," I said. "That's human. But you made me the danger, because admitting you cared was harder." "I did care." I waited. He looked through the window at Noah's bent head. "I care now." His voice was low. "That's the problem." "No. The problem is what you do when caring frightens you." Luke closed his eyes for a moment. When Noah said family, I didn't think he was wrong. The confession landed quietly. "I looked at that picture and realized I'd already started imagining you here next month." Next Christmas. At parent nights. In the truck, complaining about my music. I saw all of it at once. And all I could think was that I had let this happen before. Did you imagine me leaving too? Every day, the answer was immediate. Luke told me that when I joked about moving, when he saw the unopened boxes, when Eric appeared, he heard a clock starting. He had begun expecting the moment I would decide their life was too small, too scheduled, too complicated. Then Noah said family. And I thought if I stopped it now, maybe it would hurt less. His laugh was bitter. Instead, I hurt both of you before anything had even happened. You hurt yourself too. Luke looked at me, and the tiredness in his face became something more open. Yes, for years, I had imagined that if someone finally asked me to stay, I would know exactly how to answer. Standing there, I understood that staying was not a single promise. It was a series of choices made while every old instinct told you to keep one hand on the door. I can't promise nothing will ever go wrong, I said. I can't promise I'll never be scared or angry or need space. But I can promise I won't disappear without telling you what's happening. I won't make Noah wonder if he caused it. And I won't make you guess whether I'm coming back. Luke's eyes shone in the porch light. But I'm not doing this as a guest you can uninvite whenever you panic. He stepped closer. What are you asking me for? I almost laughed because the question was so simple and so impossible. A choice. Not forever tonight. Not a promise you can't guarantee. I'm asking whether you want to try building something with me when it stops being easy. Luke took a breath that shook on the way out. I do. He said it again. Stronger. I want you here. The dinners weren't for Noah. Not only. They became the best part of my day. I started cooking things you liked. I listened for your door. I kept the porch light on because I wanted to know you'd cross over. The blue cup was a manipulative object. Luke gave a broken laugh. It's still in the cabinet. I know. You can have it back. That's not what I want. The humor faded. Luke lifted one hand but stopped before touching me. Waiting, I closed the distance myself. His palm settled against my jaw. Warm and rough. Exactly where it had been the night in the hallway. Can I kiss you? He asked. Yes. The kiss was careful at first, almost formal. Two men testing whether honesty had changed the shape of the space between them. Then Luke exhaled against my mouth and pulled me closer. I gripped the front of his shirt. We bumped into the porch post and both started laughing. The front door opened 2 inches. Are the 10 minutes done? Noah asked. Luke rested his forehead against mine. My son has terrible timing. It might be genetic. Noah opened the door wider and looked from Luke's hand at my waist to my face. Are you still mad? We were talking. Luke crouched, so they were eye level. Danny and I care about each other, he said. More than just neighbors. Noah considered this. Like dating. Luke looked at me. I nodded. Like dating, he said. Noah's expression remained serious. Does that mean he's coming to pizza night? I hope so, I said. Okay. He stepped back inside. My worksheet is terrible. We did not make Noah promises about the future. We did not tell him I was moving in, becoming another parent, or staying forever. Luke said we were going to take our time and talk honestly. I said that if anything changed, we would not vanish or make him guess. Noah listened while drawing circles around the wrong answers on his math sheet. When we finished, he pushed the empty chair out with his foot. You can sit there, he said, exactly as he had the first night. This time Luke looked at me before I sat. There was fear in his face, but he did not turn away from it. He pulled the chair out the rest of the way. Dating Luke did not transform us into emotionally gifted people. 2 weeks later, he went quiet after I mentioned a possible work trip. Instead of canceling dinner for 3 days, he admitted he was worried. A month later, I caught myself searching rental listings after our first real argument. I closed the browser and crossed the driveway. We learned that honesty often sounded less impressive than fear. Sometimes it was Luke saying, I'm doing that thing again. Sometimes it was me saying, I want to leave because I'm afraid you'll ask me to. Then we stayed in the room long enough to finish the conversation. My house remained mine. I renewed the lease, replaced the cheap curtains, and finally hung artwork on the walls. Luke did not ask me to move in before I was ready, and I did not use independence as proof that I needed no one. Most evenings, I worked at my desk until I saw Noah's shadow move through the kitchen next door. Then I carried my laptop or a bottle of wine across the driveway. Sometimes Luke cooked, sometimes I did. after he taught me how to use the new oven without creating an emergency. Noah claimed my pasta was improving, which from him qualified as a major award. In December, Luke helped me open the final box in my hallway. It contained framed photographs, winter clothes, and my mother's old ceramic lamp. Nothing important enough to justify months of avoidance. I placed the lamp beside the couch and flattened the box myself. Later, we went next door for pancakes because Noah had decided dinner rules should not apply during school vacation. He handed me a new Meteor Max comic. On the last page, 3 badly drawn people stood in a kitchen while a weather-controlling dog stole pancakes from the table. My blue cup sat beside the figure wearing my glasses. Luke came up behind me and rested his hand at my lower back. The gesture was easy now, no longer an accident he had to apologize for. "Food's getting cold," Noah complained. I looked at the table. 3 plates, 3 cups, my chair already pulled out. No one asked whether I was staying for dinner. No one needed to. I sat down while Luke took the seat beside me and Noah launched into an explanation of the dog's latest powers.